Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Hi, yeah. My name is Dr. Theodros. I'm a senior lecturer in global public health and nutrition. Prince Mikhail the Makonnen is with us, so I will now refer to him to give us a little bit about, so tell us about himself and about the event. And once again, it's a great honor to have you here, Prince Michael. And please do tell us a little bit about you and what you think of the event.
Thank you. Well, I'm the grandson of Emperor Haile Selassie. I'm the second son of Prince Makonnen Haile Selassie, Duke of Harar. I was very happy that I was invited, and I'm glad the organizer were very well organized. The event was a good event. Most of it was about history of what happened then in 1954. I'm very honored and I'm very proud of my grandfather, the honorary degree then, which brought Britain and Ethiopia together, closer. To get an honorary degree then for an African leader is exceptional. And I like the new generation like you, who's a professor, a teacher in Oxford, to be able to organize this. And I hope the next generation will continue this tradition, honoring the emperor, my grandfather, who has worked very hard to develop Ethiopia for the world. And he has also contributed to education, introducing university, higher education, high schools, I mean. And so I'm very pleased that I was able to participate in this event.
Father, I beseech thee, and the moon. Father, I beseech thee, by the angels.
Is very, very ancient, and it's actually part of our first world, if you kind of look at it that way, because the history is very long. But also the issue of Ethiopians going out to be teachers is also very old, okay? And you look at Ethiopian history and the priests who went to Jerusalem, who part of the Coptic, the early Christianity, the history of the Ethiopian Jewish community, of Islam, all involve people coming and going and visiting and transferring knowledge. So this is all very, very, very deep, and this is very much aware in the consciousness within Ethiopia. And here is where especially His Majesty was both very proud of the ancient traditions of Ethiopia in all its spectrum, as well as being very keen about modern education and modern technology. And part of his sort of going around the world was also to kind of bring in, recruit teachers and everything. And he was also very himself cosmopolitan. I don't know if people realize how many languages he spoke and how many languages were spoken in his family. And the Ethiopian elites in general are very, very cosmopolitan and always have been. And I think one forgets this. And now it's repeated in the diaspora. But the great knowledge of some of them who, especially the priests or whoever who speak three, Arabic, Hebrew, French, German, you name it. It's a great feeling of cosmopolitanness. And this is against some of the knowledge where people think, oh, Ethiopia buried in history, forgotten by the past, all alone, insular. Actually, in some places maybe yes, but in other places no. They were part of the global world and still are. So these are just some of the things to kind of throw out and reflect on. But the early 50s and 40s, after the emperor came back to Ethiopia, he took a great interest. He was very keen on modernizing the education system and bringing in and opening schools. He founded the university. Part of his coming here was also to kind of expand, And later on, for various reasons, even though his relatives came here, and he had prime ministers who came here, and actually the first student from Ethiopia, I believe, was 1929 to 1932 at Brasenose College. The son of Blata Geta Hirui, Sirak Hirui, who then went home and translated the book, the Rasselas Prince of Abyssinia. And his father was also an educated man in the Ethiopian tradition. He was, I think, foreign minister for Menelik. But anyway, I think he was the first student in Oxford. And then there are others, we'll talk about them later. But the emperor took great interest in the students. He shepherded them. His own family went to university. All the young ones he sent off. He met them. All the pictures in his own books, you show him, meeting students and going to schools. And as he developed schools around the country, both state schools, and then he encouraged missionaries to come in and open schools. And then there were the foreign communities there also opened schools. So there was an Indian school, a French school, a German school, a Swedish school, but they were international schools. They were not schools just for those communities. There was no kind of apartheid there. And the other interesting thing about them is they also taught Amharic for those who wanted to learn Amharic, and they were very international. But the secondary schools, as they expanded, were very, very of interest to the emperor. And he would visit most afternoons after he held court and he did the affairs of state. He would go in his car with his little dogs and members of the family, and he would go and open a school, open a hospital, a clinic, and you would hear the car with Captain Shambal Timo in front. He's a very imposing bodyguard who had whiskers down here, and pat. And everybody would know, oh, and he would stop and he would just roll down the window, and people would come, and he would often give them, money, and I was given 5 birr once like that. But and he would go over, to the provinces in those days and open schools. So he followed the students, but he was also very personal with those scholars who studied Ethiopia, who had a great interest in Ethiopia. And for example, I think, Wendy, was it correct? Edward Ullendorf, the first, he was given a prize by the emperor. So anyone who came to his attention, who supported Ethiopian studies, Ethiopian history, would be personally recognized by him. So he had this very, very close and intense, and even though he wanted new things. He was also very proud that people were proud of Ethiopian history. And as the schools expanded, one of the interesting things, we hear a lot about the Ethiopian student movement and the involvement of, revolutionaries and everything. And there are more and more young people of that generation are now writing their own memoirs. And part of the memoirs, apart from the politics side, is also the social side. There's a great nostalgia going on about what it was like being in school, especially being a boarder, whether it was a Haile Selassie secondary school or whether it was the Jimma College or Agagi Mission, because this was where young people from the rural areas met kids from the town. This is where, if you were from Walaga, you met someone, from Addis Ababa, or you went to school. So people were mixing with each other, and these schools have a kind of memory of a lovely time, sheltered, protected, where you studied, you learned. And it was a time where also you were thinking in different ways. There were all different kinds of teachers. They were recruited from Europe, from India, and then the Peace Corps came. The Peace Corps had a tremendous influence. And you can go down the street with an old Peace Corps, and I can tell you numerous stories. And he may be called Jim or David or Samantha, and they may be gray-haired, and they may be bald, and they may have, changed shape from when they were in the 60s. And you walk around Dese or somewhere or Jimma, and someone will come and say, "Hello, Dr. Jim, you are my history teacher." Woo! Because it was a great time, and some of the nostalgia is around all of these things. But then, of course, part of the learning was the questioning. Part of the discovery of themselves in Ethiopia was also discovering, the history, the poverty, and that's what kind of, got the movement going and led eventually to the great student movement, but also in terms of, both now it's being questioned, illusion, disillusion, but there were also many students who weren't part of the movement. I mean, we hear those who were, but there were many students who simply studied and left and were, they may have been a part of it in thinking, but they weren't very, very active. But anyway, we will hear more about their stories as they write their history. But I think the main issue was to sort of think of those days of a very personal patronage, of a leader, and also the students themselves who were very nationalistic. My father passed away 2 years ago, and age 93, and I said to him, "Dad, what was the greatest thing you remember about being in Ethiopia?" And he said, "Oh, those students. They were the brightest, the sharpest, and they may have argued and quarreled and fought with each other on interpretations of politics or history, but my God, they loved Ethiopia." So, that's the kind of a tribute. And anyway, so nowadays, as I say, part of the nostalgia, and I know all of you have been students here, so you can share your stories. But there's a great literature coming out now. Memoirs are coming out in Amharic, in Orominya, in different languages, and more people are writing, and everyone is reflecting, who they were, what they were. But there's also that nostalgia of the age of perfection. Schooling nowadays, there are many strides. Lots of people are going to school. There are many schools. There are schools languages are being taught, and there's been a lot of development, and it's very expansive. At the same time, there's also a feeling that it's not good enough. But I think that is what development, and you know, we will see what happens. But the point is that now, where there were no schools, where there were no roads, you know, there's been a lot of changes. And one of the research that is taking place in Oxford by two groups. One is at the School of International Development. There's a study called Young Lives, and this is taking a 20-year perspective of the changes that have happened for Ethiopian youth. There's another group, an NGO, where Alula Pankhurst works also, which is doing another 20-year retrospective of 20 communities in Ethiopia. And again, working with researchers in different universities in Ethiopia, spanning all the different economic, livelihood, educational changes. And so there's lots of interesting things going on. And also, you know, people are debating, okay, how is the youth, you know, how do we compare the youth? What is their ideology today from what it was yesterday? How do they link? How strong was the activist movement to this new activist movement? You know, what is the role of music? There's lots of interesting research going on music as a way of rethinking Ethiopian history and the young ideologues of today. But anyway, it was just to give a flavor of that and to remind ourselves of the very personal interest. And there's a whole generation who do remember, you know, actually a visit of the emperor, and even though the kind of the love affair fell out after a while, there's still that memory of Timur and Nagarachin, and you know, the wanting of change. So this is just what I wanted to share with you. Thank you. So now, having talked a lot about some of the issues initiated by Haile Selassie within Ethiopia, we go on to discuss a lot more about some of the movements and the issues inspired by Haile Selassie, his presence, his history, and Ethiopia, its own history and part of global, and the contribution of that and the inspiration in the forming of the global Pan-African movement and especially the Rastafari movement. And so we move now into the next session to hear from members of that community who we are very welcome, who come from London, Bristol, and we start with
Father, I beseech thee.
Native Mark. Yeah, from Oxford, our own educationalist here. Thank you, welcome. And we can talk about modern art and some of the work you've been doing.
Okay. It's a blessing to be here on this occasion. I would like to share with you my reasoning on why Haile Selassie should be considered a pioneering figure in modern art in Africa. When we talk about modern art in Africa, the pioneering figures we tend to think about Benjamin Monroe of Nigeria and Anatsui of Ghana. Haile Selassie never mentioned, so I'd just like to share the reasons why I think he should be recognised. Okay. In 1961, when the independence icon Kwame Nkrumah set up the Institute of Art and Culture, and when he supported the first modern artists of Ghana, such as Kofi Antabon and Abode Glover, to me, he was continuing following that legacy that Haile Selassie set. If you look over on the other side of the continent, to another independence icon, Julius Nyerere, when he set up the NAGs in the 60s, National Art Groups, which focused on theatre. Remember that he translated some of Shakespeare's plays into Swahili. But so it focused on theatre, on dance, drama, as well as the fine arts. And he gave full support to the founding in 1974 of what was called the Nyumba Yasana, the House of Art. Once again, that is an example of following the legacy of Haile Selassie. When did this begin? Well, it started in the late 40s and 50s when he sent Ethiopian students abroad for study. I'm talking specifically about the people I call the three wise men of modern art as far as Ethiopia is concerned. So, Gebre Desta, Skunda Bogosian, I'm quite sure whether I say that's right, and Afwerk Tekle. So Afwerk Tekle came here to study, came to England. Skunda Bogosian also studied in France, and Gebre Desta studied in Germany. So they went away to study, came back. Skunda Bogosian became one of the popular lecturers at Howard University, one of the historically black colleges that were set up in the Reconstruction era, but also became a very influential figure in the wider community there, the wider creative community. In his earlier days, he'd actually been a teacher in the studio of Giacometti, one of the great sculptors of the 20th century. Okay, Skunda Bogosian, we go on to Afwerk Tekle. He became like the national artist of Ethiopia. The Maskell flower, one of his paintings is like a national treasure. And there's a great stained glass work that he done for the Africa Hall in Addis Ababa. Now, to introduce Gebre Desta, because this is a special aspect and it shows the kind of the mental fortitude and vision that Haile Selassie had. So to introduce Gebre Desta, I'd like to go back to 1906 to an evening in Paris. It was a salon of Gertrude Stein, and Matisse walked in and he had something in his hand, and this is 1906, and it was a statue of a Vili figure. The Vili are a people of the Congo, and Picasso basically flipped out. They said that that night he couldn't stop touching it, kept staring at it, went home. They said he drew feverishly, crashed out sometime that early morning, elated and excited. When you look at the work that Picasso produced, you think, yeah, he might have been influenced by the Kuba of the Congo or the Fan of Gabon. 6 years later, Modigliani produced one of his great masterpieces. Now, when you look at that, you can see specifically that it comes from a certain ethnic group, because you see the almond eyes, you see this thin, elongated nose, you see this small mouth, and that is exactly the motifs of the baule of the Ivory Coast. The reason why I mention those two artists is because when Gebre Desta came back from Germany, he brought back abstract, and he was vilified by a lot of the Ethiopians. You know, how dare you bring this back? This is un-Ethiopian. This is unpatriotic. This is Western. The one person that stood up and defended him was Haile Selassie. So I just wanted to speak a few words and just emphasise for you that certain things are mentioned and certain things aren't mentioned, and I think that he deserves to be recognised as as a champion of modern art in Africa for two reasons. One, because he was the first African leader to send students abroad for art study, and two, he was the first African leader to found an art school at a university. So for that, I think His Majesty deserves the title Haile Selassie I.
Can you introduce yourself for me, please?
Hi, yeah. My name is Dr. Theodros. I'm a senior lecturer in global public health nutrition. We're here today gathered to commemorate a special day, a day where His Imperial Highness Haile Selassie came to receive an honorary degree, doctorate degree in civil law from one of the highly prestigious universities, the University of Oxford. So, considering this was a unique opportunity to represent a unique relationship between Ethiopia and Britain, we're here together to revive those period and possibly to connect the event with today's generation in regard to establishing a much more solid link between the two people, the two countries, which possibly we could think of establishing a much higher rapport, which will include different generation, different nationalities, especially in Ethiopia, especially in the academic environment, to be able to open a dialogue of friendship, of diplomacy between what was once known as the rigid and the solid Ethiopian political culture, which has seen and been given a much higher value in Ethiopia, in Africa, in Britain and around the world. So I'm very pleased to be one of the semi-organizer, including Dr. Angela Raven-Robert, Dr. Tadessa Walde, and Dr. Elizabeth, and myself. I think I'm very keen, we have come to this point now to initiate a short-term and long-term dialogue in reviving a time where His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie came to Oxford to receive an honorary degree in civil law.
Father, I beseech thee, by the angels of the hills and the mountains where it be, for the earths were created. I beseech the angels of fire, I beseech thee by the heavens, which are thy throne. The heavens are thy throne. I beseech thee by the earth, thy footstool. I beseech thee by Jerusalem. I beseech thee by Mount Tabor, whereon you were transfigured. I beseech thee by Mount Zion. I beseech thee by the Mount of Olives, the door of thy kingdom. I beseech thee by John. I beseech thee by thy Holy Spirit. I beseech thee by thy holy cross. I beseech thee by the nails driven through thy hands and thy feet. I beseech thee by thy holy body and thy glorious blood. I beseech thee by thy passion and thy death and resurrection.
I Thank you all so very, very, very much. Before we finish, there are some people who would like to say some words, okay?
I was only going to add that one of the visionary parts of one of the visionary parts of His Majesty's work was to bring together what I always called the Nobel Prize of Africa, where he brought together artists and others under the name of the Haile Selassie Prize Trust, which I thought was a magical period of every year, or every 3 years I think it was, when they brought together art from all over Africa, artists, and created this wonderful position of people who contributed to his idea of Pan-Africanism, I suppose, which was inspired activity, and it brought so many people together. And this was after the Organization of African Unity and other such things, but the expanding vision that he held for the arts.
Thank you so much. Would anybody like to add a few other things before I finish? Because Is she? Oh yeah.
No, I have nothing to say, but I just wanted everyone to give Angela really a hand of applause.
Yeah.